RFK Jr. and the future of vaccines, COVID and childhood, the centerpiece of a loud and impassioned Senate hearing. And then we will follow up with Dr. Michael Osterholm on the next pandemic and how public health experts fumbled parts of the COVID response. Supreme Court Justice Amy Coney Barrett with our Norah O'Donnell. One focus, the legal future of same-sex marriage. Hello, everyone. I'm Major Garrett in Washington. Let me welcome you to the Takeout. The Make America Healthy Again agenda, powerful in the 2024 election, is kind of an umbrella coalition with lots of different grievances, some against COVID regulations, others against food dyes, pesticides, the power of big pharma, and vaccines generally. And that coalition and the political force behind it is sort of fraying at the edges. Priorities have clashed in public. Infighting has spread from the Department of Health and Human Services to the White House and then back again. That has led to turmoil, as I'm sure you've noticed, at the Food and Drug Administration and the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. HHS Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. appeared this morning before the Senate Finance Committee, ostensibly to discuss President Trump's MAHA agenda, but many other issues intruded. But here is part of RFK Jr.'s opening statement.
Under President Trump's leadership, we at HHS are enacting a once-in-a-generation shift from a sick care system to a true health care system that tackles the root causes of chronic disease. 76.4% of Americans now have a chronic disease. This is stunning. When my uncle was president, it was 11%.
His uncle, President John Kennedy, his father, JFK's Attorney General, Democratic powerhouses both, with RFK Jr. now a conspicuous family MAGA and MAHA outlier. Chronic disease prevention became a kind of rhetorical shield when senators, Republican and Democrat, pressed Kennedy on future vaccine access.
This is a witness who has lied to members of the Senate Finance Committee. In response to over 35 written questions, including from me, he said, and I quote, that he would do nothing as HHS Secretary that makes it difficult or discourages people from taking vaccines. That was clearly not true.
Kennedy said the pharmaceutical industry has long influenced drug approval and scientific reviews at the federal level. Hence, he said, the necessity of new CDC and FDA procedures. Republican Senator Bill Cassidy, a doctor and key GOP voice leading to RFK Jr.'s confirmation, raised this question, however, about changes Kennedy has recently made to a key CDC panel that reviews vaccines.
What I am concerned about is that many of those whom you've nominated for ACIP have received revenue as serving as expert witnesses for plaintiffs' attorneys suing vaccine makers. Now, one of my colleagues in another setting alleged that you seem more interested in settlements than science. If we put people who are paid witnesses for people suing vaccines, that actually seems like a conflict of interest. Real quickly, do you agree with that?
No, I don't. It may be a bias, and that bias, if disclosed, is okay. But it's not a financial. It's not a financial conflict. It's not a financial conflict of interest.
Let me finish up.
Kennedy also called Dr. Susan Manarez, who he pressed the Senate to confirm as CDC director, only to fire her 29 days after she took the job, a liar. Senators appeared astonished at that assertion at today's committee hearing. Manarez wrote in today's Wall Street Journal, I was told, quote, to pre-approve the recommendations of a vaccine advisory panel newly filled with people who have publicly expressed anti-vaccine rhetoric. Once trusted experts are removed and advisory bodies are stacked, she went on to write, the results are predetermined. This isn't reform. It is sabotage, unquote. Just a quick reminder, when President Trump nominated Manarez to lead the CDC, he vowed that she and RFK Jr. would, quote, prioritize accountability, high standards, and disease prevention to finally address the chronic disease epidemic and make America healthy again. About all of this, we turn now, with confidence, to Nicole Killian on Capitol Hill. Lots said in the hearing, and then you had a lot of interesting conversations, Nicole, after the hearing. What were some of those takeaways?
Yeah, well, look, I mean, it was combative on all sides. You know, you had senators, both Democrat and Republican, unloading on Secretary Kennedy, but he, too, was pointing the finger right back and really taking issue at sometimes even calling some of these senators liars or saying that he doesn't know what they're talking about. So it was a very heated exchange with a lot of discussion about a number of issues, whether that was access to vaccines, the efficacy of vaccines, you know, relitigating COVID and how the first Trump administration handled that, you know, this vaccine advisory committee and Kennedy's decision to fire many of those officials, the obviously ongoing situation at the CDC. So there was a lot to get at times, as I mentioned, very contentious with some name calling. Senator Maria Cantwell at one point calling Secretary Kennedy a charlatan. Take a listen to what she told me right after that.
Why did you call the secretary a charlatan? Because look up the definition of charlatan. He fits it very well. He's conflating issues and trying to confuse people instead of presenting accurate information.
So she pressed him quite a bit during that hearing over the vaccine issue. Also, you know, some Republicans also expressed a lot of their concerns. It wasn't just people like Senator Bill Cassidy, who is the chair of the Senate Health Committee, but we also heard from Senator Barrasso, a top GOP leader in the Senate, who questioned Secretary Kennedy pretty extensively about vaccine access, as did Senator Tom Tillis. But Cassidy was critical and really tangled with Kennedy at times. As I mentioned, he helms the Senate Health Committee, so I asked him whether he plans to call the secretary back here to Capitol Hill. Take a listen to that exchange.
Are you satisfied with the secretary's answer, sir? And will you call him in to testify before your panel?
Again, I'll, right now, why don't we just allow what happened, the exchange there, to stand on its own.
So again, Cassidy kind of holds the cards there and keeping them pretty close to the vest, but he has said that there does need to be more oversight conducted, though what that looks like remains to be seen. The ranking member on the Senate Health Committee, Bernie Sanders, has made clear that he does want to hear from from Secretary Kennedy. He also wants to hear from that fired CDC director, Susan Menarez.
Nicole Killian, thank you so very, very much. I appreciate it. Disease expert Dr. Michael Osterholm joins me now. He's the author of the new book, the big one, How We Must Prepare for Future Deadly Pandemics. Doctor, it's great to have you with me.
Thank you.
Help my audience sort all this out. Where Kennedy is, what's happening at HHS, what's happening at CDC and the FDA.
Well, I can put it very succinctly in the fact that our vaccine world is now in free fall. This is the most dangerous time I've known in the 50 years I've been in the business. And it's because of the fact that there's an agenda here that's not about protecting our children or protecting adults. It's about ideology. And I think until we recognize that and deal with that, we're going to continue to see the vaccines threatened in terms of their availability and who will have access to them.
And doctor, it's my impression that this is no longer a conversation about COVID vaccines or mandates. It has spread. Florida announced just yesterday that it is going to end mandates for an entire battery of childhood vaccines that have been used for decades: measles, mumps, rubella, smallpox, hepatitis B, and the like.
Right. This is, in fact, something that's happening not just in Washington, D.C., but around the country. But it surely is gaining legs as a result of Mr. Kennedy's approach and what he's doing. You know, he continues to misrepresent the information in a kind way I can say that. For example, today in the hearing, he said that only one single study had ever been done in childhood vaccines that was what we call a randomized controlled trial, where some of the people got a placebo, some people got the vaccine. We've identified 511 such studies that have been done for all 12 of the childhood vaccines. Mr. Kennedy's been given this information multiple times and yet continues to misrepresent it. So one of the challenges we have is this is not about education. This is not about getting him to come together with other experts, which, by the way, he's never done. He's never been briefed by any of the experts at the CDC on this issue. Again, it's basically all about ideology.
And when he says, as he did at the hearing, that the pharmaceutical industry has used its leverage to stack panels or to get things before the FDA and rush them through, how would you evaluate that line of criticism?
That's simply, again, not true, and the record bears that out. all the information for which a vaccine is approved or disapproved by the FDA from public companies that make these vaccines is all made public, so you have it in advance. Today, he was asked, would he provide the kind of background information that he's using to make his recommendations, and he refused to. He said that they will go ahead and make the recommendations from this new advisory committee immunization practices, but it wouldn't be available to the public.
Your book is about the next pandemic, but let's talk about the one most recently in our rearview mirror. If you could assess things that went wrong, even though the intentions were good, what would they be?
Well, first of all, we all have to recognize you go through 3 years of what we went through, even under the best of circumstances, there's going to be things you'd surely like to redo. What my real concern is right now is that unlike the 9/11 Commission, which gave us a bipartisan, really down-to-earth review of what happened or didn't happen or should have happened, and those recommendations were then put into place on a bipartisan basis. We've not done that with COVID. We've asked for that kind of review. We believe it's a very important one so that we can learn the lessons of that COVID experience. And that's going to be important because in the future, we are going to have other pandemics which could even be bigger.
And one of the things I deduced in the book is that public health officials have to acknowledge in public that there are trade-offs and that they should err on the side of keeping things open as best as possible. And there was probably an overreaction or a rush to closure during some stages of COVID. Is that a fair summary?
Well, I think actually there's a bit of revisionist history going on right now with the pandemic. For example, CDC has continued to be blamed for what happened with schools. They had no impact on schools relative to their ability to close. That was made at a local and state level. And that was often as a result of parents and teachers concerned about whether or not they would get infected being in school. And we eventually had studies showing that up to 80% of the transmission in households actually originated from a child who got infected in school. And so, again, I don't have a perfect answer for that other than to say that this is the kind of thing that we have to ask ourselves, when do you end up closing? When do you not close? And how does that look? And we do need to have that discussion, which we've not had.
And what's the most important thing we as a nation can do to prepare for the inevitability, you write, of the next big pandemic?
Well, I think to some people's surprise, I'm a real optimist. And my optimism actually comes from the fact that we can, with the right kind of support and planning, actually, I think, devise vaccines that could be very, very effective in a pandemic. They could be available, and they could prevent individuals from becoming infected, at the very least keeping them from becoming seriously ill. That all is being taken off the table right now. This administration just canceled $500 million of support for mRNA vaccines right now for influenza. So in a sense, we're going backwards on what could be a very positive development.
Dr. Michael Hallstrom, it's a great book. I appreciate your time, and thanks so much for coming in.
Thank you.
2 National Guard officials tell CBS News their deployment in Washington, D.C. will be extended to November 30th. The D.C. Attorney General, as a related matter, is suing the Trump administration over the use of troops in the district. He is alleging that President Trump's decision to do so is unconstitutional and basically creates a, quote, involuntary military occupation of the nation's capital. Jake Rosen joins me now. Jake, fill me in on what has happened today with the extension of the deployment and this lawsuit.
Well, that's right, Major. The 930 or so D.C. National Guard who were initially deployed by the Trump administration here in the nation's capital are going to remain until the end of November. This order by the National Guard does not include National Guardsmen and women who were sent from other states. Whether they remain has yet to be seen, but these National Guard officials did say that the optimal amount for this mission to keep D.C. safe is around 2,200 troops, which is where things currently stand. And as you pointed out, Major, at the same time, we saw a very similar suit to what was filed in California a couple of months ago when the Trump administration deployed the National Guard there, and a judge decided earlier this week and sided with officials in California, saying that the way that the National Guard was deployed there was illegal and against an over 100-year law that prevents the military from being used for domestic policing. There's no court date yet on the schedule in this, but certainly in the next coming days and weeks, there's very likely to be a high-stakes hearing on the same matter here in D.C.
And where is Washington, D.C.'s Mayor Muriel Bowser on this question?
Well, she really has her hands tied, which is a complicating question. And I think really as someone who has lived here for a long time, and you and I can both speak to this, there's a sense of frustration with people who live here because Mayor Bowser does not have control of the district's National Guard. That is squarely in the hands of President Trump, which is why the Pentagon can make this decision without the input of any local official here. Mayor Bowser signaled earlier this week that she is actually approving the Metropolitan Police Department takeover and cooperation that will, again, continue beyond this 30-day period, saying that at least for now, the D.C. Police Department is going to work with federal law enforcement, and that these federal law enforcement officials are going to remain in D.C. for at least the temporary long term. Again, think about October, November into the end of the year.
Jake Rosen, always a pleasure. Thank you, sir. Coming up on the Takeout, Norah O'Donnell joins me to share her conversation with Supreme Court Justice Amy Coney Barrett and the question of the future, the Supreme Court reviewing or possibly taking on the question of same-sex marriage. Also, President Trump and the New York City mayor's race. Is the White House looking for a way to clear a path for Andrew Cuomo to go one-on-one with Democratic nominee Zohran Mamdani? Plus, pets on campus to help fight stress and anxiety. How some colleges are handling requests to allow furry friends in the dormitories. And if you were wondering who these random animals on your screen actually are, yes, my dutiful and faithful producers insisted, and I agreed heartedly, that we use pictures of their pets. The Takeout returns in 90 seconds. Welcome back to the Takeout. Supreme Court Justice Amy Coney Barrett told CBS News that the Supreme Court should not, quote, be imposing its own values on the American people. This is her first television interview since joining the High Court in 2020. It's ahead of the release of her new book, Listening to the Law, Reflections on the Court and Constitution. Here is some of Barrett's conversation with our own Norah O'Donnell.
You wrote in the book, the court has held that the rights to marry, engage in sexual intimacy, use birth control, and raise children are fundamental, but the rights to do business, commit suicide, and obtain abortion are not.
Right. I'm describing the doctrine. I was a con law professor for many years. Yes, I describe the doctrine in the book, and that is the state of the law, which I described in the book because I want people to understand it. I want Americans to understand the law, and that it's not just an opinion poll about whether the Supreme Court thinks something is good or whether the Supreme Court thinks something is bad. Mm-hmm. You know, what the court is trying to do is see what the American people have decided. And sometimes the American people have expressed themselves in the Constitution itself, which is our fundamental law, sometimes in statutes. But the court should not be imposing its own values on the American people. Mm-hmm. That's for the democratic process.
And so when Hillary Clinton, for example, says, what's next? She said, my prediction is the court will do to gay marriage what they did to abortion.
Well, I think people who criticize the court or who are outside say a lot of different things. But again, the point that I make in the book is that we have to tune those things out. So,
but you also say in the book that the rights to marry and engage in sexual intimacy and use birth control and raise children are fundamental.
Yes, again, I'm describing what our doctrine is, and that is what we've said. Mm-hmm.
CBS News senior correspondent Norah O'Donnell joins me now for more of an interview with Justice Barrett. Great to have you, Norah. When the justice says fundamental, that seems to me to be an important dividing line between those issues, those rights, and others that the court may, in the future, interpret.
Right. This may be one of those Q&As where you wish you had a law degree.
Yes.
But let me help explain them, because this is important. Under the 14th Amendment, there is the Due Process Clause. Of course, the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments were Reconstruction amendments. The 14th Amendment talks about these life and liberty and fundamental rights. This Supreme Court and others has defined what these fundamental rights are. So traditionally, Griswold granted the fundamental right to contraception, Obergefell, same-sex marriage. Roe versus Wade, the right to privacy and liberty granted under the Due Process Clause of the 14th Amendment. This court, the majority on this court, has said that no, abortion is not a fundamental right in the Constitution. It's not one that is popularly accepted because of the contentious nature of it. So it's important to understand that. And that's why in the dissent by the minority on Dobbs, They said, well, if abortion is not a fundamental right, then maybe gay marriage or same-sex marriage is not, or maybe contraception is not. And so that's why this question is before Justice Barrett and this court. If there's a case that presents itself, how would they rule? And I think that's a central question.
And for same-sex marriage, there is, and she made reference to statute, a federal law that protects it. That would have to be something the Supreme Court would also have to take in, quite separate from the 14th Amendment or the fundamental line that she's drawing about these rights.
Right, because that is something that the people have decided.
Through their elected representatives.
Through their elected representatives. And I think what you'll find in our interview with Justice Amy Coney Barrett, she wants to make very clear, and in her book, that look, there are the three separate but co-equal branches of government. There is Congress, the legislative branch. That is a political branch. There is the executive or the presidency. That is a political branch. The judicial or the Supreme Court is not supposed to be a political branch. And so they want to appear to be as neutral as possible. Certainly people criticize them a great deal, but she's trying to make sure, and that's important to understand, and also because they're trying to push back against this narrative that has developed with a conservative supermajority that they are favorable to President Trump and designs that he may have to expand executive power.
And there'll be several cases very soon before the court in which that will also be sifted and evaluated, that very point.
And what's important to know is that Justice Amy Coney Barrett is an influential vote. In fact, observers that I talk with say she is the most influential justice on the Supreme Court today. She's 53. She's the mother of 7. She's a Catholic who taught at Notre Dame for nearly 2 decades. So the questions, how much is she like Justice Scalia, who she clerked for? Does her faith influence her judicial decision-making? She says, no, it does not. So there's lots in here to learn more about these justices. And as our good friend Jan Crawford, who covers the court, says, you know, the Supreme Court can be so mysterious. So any opportunity that we can have to learn more about these justices is a privilege as a journalist. And as those of all of us who vote, we want to learn more about this one branch of the government that is a check on the ones that are democratically elected.
And that opportunity uniquely presented itself to the unique and powerful Norah O'Donnell.
Oh, thank you.
Always great to have you with us, Norah. Thank you so very much.
Me.
You can see more of Norah's interview with Justice Barrett on CBS Sunday morning beginning at 9 o'clock Eastern. You can also watch it on the CBS News app beginning at 11 a.m. Eastern. Next, the New York City mayor's race. How the Trump administration might try to influence who wins. That's next here on The Takeout. Welcome back to The Takeout. Thanks for hanging out with us. President Trump appears to be trying to help Andrew Cuomo in the New York City mayor's race. Sources tell CBS News New York that the administration is exploring ways to induce incumbent Mayor Eric Adams and Republican candidate Curtis Sliwa to both drop out of the race. This is important because a recent poll found that in a head-to-head matchup, Cuomo, if the poll is correct, big if, would defeat Democratic nominee Zohran Mamdani. Here with me now, notice, remember, that is News of the U.S. political reporter Oriana Gonzalez and Politico White House reporter Sophia Kai. Great to have you both here. This is now a White House story, straight up.
Yeah. I mean, absolutely. Look, Trump, he cannot help himself but get involved. He told his cabinet that he wasn't going to get involved, but he's been calling prominent people in New York talking about this race because for him, this race is personal. This is not Cincinnati. It's not San Francisco even. It's New York. It's the place that he grew up, the place he built his career. So, of course, this feels personal.
And, Oriana, what is this about? Is it about trying to give them a job in the administration or try to find some private sector folks in New York to induce them to, just drop out and there'll be a big lucrative thing waiting for you on the other side?
I mean, what we saw, the New York Times report, was that they are thinking about offering Eric Adams a job. And here's the thing. What is the Trump administration, if not the home of unwanted Democrats? We saw that with Tulsi Gabbard. We saw that with RFK Jr. and potentially now with Eric Adams.
Right. And to your point, Sophia, the larger sort of meta interest of the Republican Party is to see Mamdani elected and then run against the socialist / whatever other negative terminology they want to apply. But for Trump,
Mamdani is a repudiation of Trump.
So he wants it on for personal reasons.
Yeah, and I think also the Trump political team feels that there's many other examples that you can take as examples of bad Democrats, right? You've got Pelosi, you've got Newsom, you've got the entire
J.B.
cast.
Pritzker.
The entire cast of 2028 candidates.
Westmore, he's been running against the
there you go. And you've seen all the memes coming out of the White House. So, you know, for them, it's like, take your pick.
Now, just for the record, Adams has sort of dismissed this. Curtis Lee will put out a statement today, the Republican, saying he's not interested and hasn't talked to anyone. But this still churns, right?
Oh, definitely. We still need to see exactly what happens.
But it better happen quick.
Oh, yeah. I mean, quickly, but also there's a couple months till November. Anything can happen then. We have these news happening now. Who's to say that a month from now it's announced that he's going to be an ambassador?
So we have new CBS polling data that I want to show you about the economy. Anthony Salvanto and I talked about this on the program yesterday. You can see the numbers there. Economy good, 38%, 36%. Boy, I need to fix my eye. What is it, 38, 30?
36.
36, thank you, Ariana. You're closer to the monitor. Oh my God, these old aged eyes of mine. The point of that is Trump continues to say everything is roaring and America is the hottest country on the planet. Not feeling it, according to our poll. So
this is what he ran on, right? I mean, stump speech after stump speech, he talked about the economy and inflation, but now he can't blame it on anyone else. He's 8 months into his term, and he sort of has to take ownership of it. But you can tell that it's top of mind for him. He uses, you know, the economy and mortgage rates to justify his reshaping of the Federal Reserve.
Or attempt to reshape it.
His attempt to reshape it, yeah. And so this is absolutely top of mind for him, and he knows that people are going to vote on it next year.
And Oriana, we opened the show necessarily today with RFK Jr. before the Senate Finance Committee. I want to show you a poll that information from our CBS News poll. Today, RFK Jr.'s approval rating, 45%, disapproval, 55%. That's an indicator that there are some limits to Maha and the agenda and rhetoric around it.
Oh, definitely. We saw so much, a little bit of a mess, I want to say, happening in HHS this last week with the firings at the CDC, the firing at the CDC, and then having top CDC officials leaving explicitly for saying that the agency was becoming too political. That's a huge problem, especially, again, coming from a president that during his first administration helped develop the COVID vaccine, and now we're seeing a complete 180.
Oriana Gonzalez, Sophia Kai, thanks so very much. And I do apologize for my aged eye monitor. I'm always apologizing for my eyes. Coming up, a common thread between some, that's an important word, some school shooters. New research we're going to review on the links to violent and extremist online content and those shootings. That's next, right here on The Takeout. Welcome back to The Takeout and the Conversation Corner. Here's what happens in the wake of a school shooting. Investigators immediately zero in, if they can, on the suspect's recent online activity. Now, new research shows some very alarming similarities in the online history of two people who carried out shootings just 1 month apart, according to an analysis conducted by the Anti-Defamation League Center on Extremism. The perpetrators behind the Abundant Life Christian School shooting in December of 2024 and the Antioch High School shooting in January of this year immersed themselves in similar extremist ideologies and very violent content. The shooters killed a combined 3 people, injured many others before taking their own lives. Joining me now, former FBI Special Agent Catherine Schweit. Catherine, this is a hard thing to do because I want to talk to you about this online content, but we struggle journalistically always with this question. Does talking about it platform it, legitimize it, create new avenues for people to find these things that are, by their very nature, meant to lure them in psychically and can take them to a very dangerous place?
Well, I would say yes and no. When I started down this road, when I was working on this, it started after the Sandy Hook massacre. I was imploring people in your seat to stop making hysterical comments and constantly putting at the top of the news and running pictures. But think about it, 15, 20 years ago, we were running the photos of the shooters and all the video we could and all this imagery that we could on the shooter and what the shooter was doing and what they were carrying. And we talked really about the shooters. We don't do that now, and that's really helped. But there is this online world that is still doing that. So I feel like traditional news media is doing so much better about being conscious of not wanting to help along a shooter. But I think the online platform is there.
Describe for my audience what is there online and how in these two particular cases it was a rabbit hole that led them to do things that astonished those who were close to them and their own families.
Yeah, I think that's really why I wanted to bring this out. I mentioned it, I posted about it because it's really a beautiful, the ADL analysis is a great example of how somebody can be groom themselves, others groom them online in these ways that there are sites online that are, I want to be a school shooter, I want to hate others, I want to see the gore. There are these terrible sites. I don't want to give you lots of names of them, but they really desensitize people who are going down these rabbit holes. There's a website that's just like the ADL looked at one that was just all video of people getting executed, killing themselves, killing other people, murdering people, anything that they can get. And that is a gore site that people get desensitized to it. And then at the same time, there are people with extremist views that are on those sites that are recruiting others, and they're recruiting young people, and that's what we saw here.
And the timeline in these two instances really march right along.
Oh, and I think that's the great part about it is you get a chance to really see how somebody went from being curious to all the way to the execution of shooting in 18 months, 19 months for these two people. Side by side, they both went on this one website at the same time, and then bit by bit, you begin to see them start to comment, make comments, begin to follow other people who they admire, who espouse hate, and they become more vulnerable, but also more vociferous in the way that they say things. And that leads to the actions that we saw at both of those schools.
The impossible question to answer, what's the remedy?
I think a lot of awareness that this exists. If you don't think that your kid can get on these sites, and particularly anybody, say, under the age of 25 is much more vulnerable to them, they're being recruited just like somebody, sextortion, right? Just like somebody recruits, a pedophile recruits and grooms, people are grooming people on these sites. And sometimes they start by gaming sites. They go into a gaming site and then they say, you should see what's on this site. If you like what you're seeing on this shoot 'em up game, you want to see real shootings? Go here. So you got to know what your kids are doing. And I know we hear that all the time, but your kids, I always say, your kids don't have the privacy rights you do as an adult.
Right.
Please don't give them that because they need your guidance.
You've got to understand the inventory, and then you've got to stay involved.
Exactly. It's so important to stay involved.
Catherine Tribe, I am told that you are a very big fan of the golden takeout tie rack. Please invite yourself to go pick out a tie and take for your best purposes.
I would love a tie because I don't even own one tie for me, and I feel like I should have one.
You go over there. I'm going to read the
that'd be awesome.
The copy to break, and you just take whatever tie you want.
I'm going to pick one out. Thank you. I'll leave you a toy in exchange.
Very good. I get a book for she gets a tie. Everything is transactional.
I love it.
And happily so here at the Takeout. Influencing future elections with a national emergency declaration. It could happen. An expert tells us next about what the possibilities are for what President Trump may do in this political space. That's next right here on the Takeout. Welcome back. Yes, it's true. I love to spend time here in the Conversation Corner. Here's our next topic. Cleta Mitchell, an attorney who played an off-again, on-again role in President Trump's attempt to overturn the valid and multiple times confirmed 2020 election, says the president could declare a national emergency to influence future elections. David Becker joins me now. He's the CBS News election law expert, executive director of the Center for Election Innovation and Research, and co-author of a most outstanding book called The Big Truth. He was my co-author. I was his co-author. David, talk to us about this possible declaration of a national emergency.
Yeah, as you mentioned, Cleta Mitchell has been spreading conspiracy theories about elections for some time. She was literally in the room with President Trump during that famous call in 2021 with this Georgia Secretary of State saying, find me 11,780 votes. And she recently said that the president could declare a national election security emergency or something of that sort. And it's very important that we should note that That is completely false. There is absolutely nothing in the Constitution that gives the president literally any power over elections. Remember, the founders, when they wrote the Constitution, they just fought a war against a tyrant seeking their own freedom, and they were very worried about a future despot taking that kind of power. So they created the Elections Clause in the Constitution, which says that the states run elections, and only Congress can change that, and it takes all of Congress to change that. The president plays no role. We've never had to postpone or declare an emergency with any election. We've had, through almost 250 years, every federal general election has gone on as scheduled, through the Civil War, through the influenza pandemic, through 2 world wars, through the COVID-19 pandemic. So there's no legal basis for that. But it also should be noted that there's also no legal basis for the president to declare an emergency about tariffs or about immigration or about some other things that he's declared emergencies for and tried to seize power. And it's taken the courts a little while to catch up to that, to try to stop and rein in the president's excessive use of force.
The president also lately has really been on this crusade against mail-in balloting. He even said earlier this week that a decision to move the command of Space Force from Colorado to Alabama was in part influenced by the idea that Colorado has mail-in balloting. The two he somehow connected. Mail-in balloting has a history with President Trump, does it not?
Yeah, it does. At least in his mind, it does. I mean, he's kind of separated perception from reality here. Mail-in voting has been around since the Civil War. It's been widely embraced by many states, red and blue, red states like Utah and Montana, blue states like Colorado and California. And it was actually initially pushed mostly by Republicans who thought older, property-owning rural voters who they thought of as their voters would find it more convenient to vote by mail. And up until 2020, it was widely embraced by both parties. It was only when President Trump started spreading false claims about mail voting that you saw Republicans retreat from that.
And there was more mail-in balloting during 2020 because it was a COVID-era precaution.
That's exactly right. And but it also, if you look at the mail ballot states in 2016, for instance, as we wrote in the book, the majority of states with significant mail ballots voted for President Trump in the 2016 election. In 2024, there are 36 states plus D.C. that offer no excuse mail voting, and 19 of those states voted for President Trump in 2024. So the reality of mail voting is it's really swings with how the nation swings. People vote how they want to vote, and some of them choose to vote by mail. We also know it's entirely secure, whether you're voting in Utah or whether you're voting in California. The votes are checked, the signatures are checked, sometimes ID numbers are checked. Every voter who registers to vote in the United States has to provide ID when they register to vote. So we've got various checks to make sure it's completely secure.
Also worth pointing out, President Trump has voted by mail.
Yeah, multiple times. I mean, it was his preferred method of voting, particularly after he moved to Florida.
David Becker, always a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Major.
The college move-in checklist, books, bedding, and your dog. Why some colleges are allowing students to bring along their four-legged friends. That's next here on The Takeout. Welcome back. For many young adults, leaving for college marks the first foray into taking care of themselves and being on their own. But not all universities believe students must be completely independent to unleash their full potential. Several colleges and universities across the United States are now allowing students to live with dogs and cats as a means of reducing their stress, anxiety, and homesickness. One of them is the University of Northern Colorado. Jed Cummins joins me now. He is, and this is a good title, Executive Director of Housing and Auxiliary Services, University of Northern Colorado. Jed, it's great to see you. Thanks for your time. So, what are the rules for living with pets in your dorms?
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to be here, Major. We have 3 different pet-friendly residence hall communities where students who bring a dog that is appropriately licensed and vaccinated and registered with us can bring a cat or a dog here to campus. And it's one of the things we're most excited about is one of our pet-friendly programs and being student-friendly here at UNC.
Jed, how did that conversation begin? Because it wasn't organic. Did students initiate this? Did they ask for it, or did you preemptively try to accommodate and get ahead of a trend you saw heading your way?
Yeah, I would say it was a little bit of both for us. UNC is my alma mater, and so we've always been an institution that is students first. And so about 10 years ago, we started asking students what they wanted out of their on-campus living experience. And one thing that a variety of students said is that they wanted to bring a cat or a dog on campus with them. And about a year after we started asking those questions, we implemented our first pet-friendly community over in Lawrence and Hall, one of our apartments. And over the past 10 years, it's been so popular, we've added an additional 2 communities. And now we have this year the highest number of pets on campus that we've ever had in our 10-year history.
Any downsides, any problems with cleanliness, any problems with pets interacting or being afraid of or biting each other or other people in the dorms, or noises like dogs just uncontrollably barking at 3 in the morning?
You know, I would say we've had some minor issues, maybe a cat that's using a couch as a scratch pad, maybe a puppy that wasn't quite as well trained and going to the bathroom where it needs to as the owner wanted them to be. But overall, UNC's really enjoyed it. I think the benefits have far outweighed those disadvantages, and typically students at UNC tend to be pretty respectful, and so have their pets.
Jed, how much of this falls into the category of emotional balance for your students and pets providing that in ways that other friends or associates on campus simply don't?
Yeah, I think a good amount of it is that. One of our students shared with me when I was asking them that their cat Louie, when they come home, it's super helpful to be able to snuggle with them. It's always also helpful for folks in the community to see the cat hanging out in the window and giving a little bit of that sense of comfort. You know, being a student anywhere is hard, and I think having an animal to connect with after the end of a long day of classes is really positive in a way that we help to support students here.
So most colleges have medical facilities for students. Have you had to create veterinary services for all the pets on campus, or is that all privately handled?
That is all done privately. We've partnered with a few local vets that we know are really quality to be able to do things like regular routine services, as well as maybe boarding if there's something going on with a student. But pretty rare that we've had to have any emergency issues with any of our pets on campus.
And last thing, Jed, is this now becoming a magnet? I mean, look, every college is competing at lots of different levels for students. Is this a magnet?
Yeah, I think this is an important reason that students choose UNC, and certainly something that we are proud to really put our mission of being students first out there for students and saying, hey, this is something that you've asked for and something that we are happy to provide and continue to expand.
I lied. One more, Jed. Are you getting inquiries from other colleges? Because you had, if I heard you correctly, almost a 10-year run with this. Are you getting inquiries about what your procedures are and how they can do the same thing?
Absolutely. Yeah, we've over our 10-year history, we've seen a lot of colleges and universities in our region ask how we've implemented the program, some of the same questions that you asked about. What if something goes wrong? How do you handle it? And we've been able to share that with a few folks who have successfully implemented it.
Pets in dorms. It's a new world for me, that's for sure. Jed Cummins, University of Northern Colorado. I appreciate the time. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
That is it for the Takeout today. I most earnestly invite you to stick around. Why? Because the Daily Report starts right now.